REAP actually is a responsive evidence for African policy making. So it's a responsive evidence system that has been developed to facilitate the uptake of evidence by research, by policymakers, by instead of telling them that this is what you need to do, putting them in the driver's seat, and then we responding to them. So we identify their needs from them themselves, and we use an online platform.
Responsive Evidence Systems for African Policy Needs, REAP. REAP is a partnership of 5 African countries, all interested in building capacity to use evidence for decision making, and that is why we have jointly invested in building an online platform to share capacity. This is the REAP online sharing capacity platform, and we currently have about 258 users in the platform and 28 teams in total. And this includes a broader group of stakeholders like the African Evidence Network and the African Evidence Youth League. The idea around this platform is that we can share capacities related to evidence use, exchange, and deepen them. There's various levels in which users can share capacity on our platform. The first one is to join a space where users can essentially discuss everything. You can think of a space as a public forum where different topics can be explored. Here's an example of a space called the Landscape Report, Mapping Education EIDM Needs and Stakeholders in African Evidence Youth League Countries. And there's an activity feed of the space as well as the participant. The second way in which users can share capacity on the REAP platform is through our EIDM library. There's currently about 500 capacity resources that you can access depending on your interest, of course. And we've also curated these resources. So there's a list of collections. As you can see, say as an example, you're interested in EIDM capacity resources, making evidence more usable. You can just simply click on that collection, view the files within that collection. And if you drill down into the files, you'd actually notice that there's what we call the AI Rev. So this is an AI integration of the library, where all the documents within the library simply gets summarized. And the third way to participate or to share resources within the platform is through their public activity feed. And as you can see, this is where users can simply share everything that is of interest to them. Some users will share some great job opportunities, and some will simply share their experiences with organizing policy and that sort of stuff. Right. And the fourth way that you can participate in the library is through the teams. So you can think of a team as a private space. So here's an example of a team. These are the members of the team. It's also got a public activity feed. But the difference between a team and a space is that in a team, you have to be invited to be a part of a team. But spaces, anybody or any user within the platform can just simply access the space. The other important thing to sort of note about the platform is that it can be translated into 3 different languages: English, French, and Swahili. There's also a mentorship program within their platform where users of the platform can participate in a mentorship program. And lastly, there's a learning and analytics powering the backend of the platform. And here's an example of what that looks like. So it's basically a conspicuous picture of all the activities that are happening within the platform. Thank you so much.
REAP really sets itself apart from other evidence to policy partnerships. It's in probably 3 dimensions. The first one is that it's focusing on a really diverse range of partners that actually hadn't worked before together very much. And I think oftentimes you go into a partnership knowing some of the parties very well, and you kind of have a trusted base, whereas within REAP, we really started from a very low baseline of knowing each other and trusted relationships. And that's the second part where REAP, I think, is different, is that we had to establish all of this in a largely online environment. I think the third element where I would put REAP forward, at least in the context that PACE often works in, is that it has been fully bilingual and very deliberate about bridging the Anglophone and Francophone gap.
So what makes this partnership different is the aspect of co-creation. The second thing is the provision of an enabling environment that is allowing our innovations that we had been struggling with to grow. In co-creation, it means that we worked together with PACE to conceive this idea and let them understand from our perspective why we think that there is an importance or there's a necessity to focus on French-speaking African countries, which is really giving us the opportunity to develop solutions from our own perspective and in a language that's comfortable with the policymakers and with the population. So in that process, we're able to co-create a project that is bilingual, that's able to reach the Francophone countries, and that's able to bring up the needs of the Francophone countries. So that's on one part. Then the other part is enabling or awakening the sleeping innovations that existed within eBASE. So as I mentioned earlier, we have been struggling with context and getting evidence into practice. So we have developed certain tools, like for policymakers, we developed something called the evidence barometer. And the evidence barometer is a tool that measures 8 components within a policy to tell us if that policy has actually used evidence in the process of its development, and whether the way it has been developed, it can actually be applied and taken up with trust by practitioners and by the population.
The Provincial Data Office in the Western Cape Office of the Premier is one of the key partner of REAP in South Africa. The PDO's remit essentially is to make sure that data is used across government decision makers, but also that data is collected, governed, administered well. So when we started our REAP journey together, PDO very much had worked a lot on improving data systems and had, I guess, developed a reputation for being one of the key actors on the continent in that regard. Within REAP, we started a lovely collaboration on how we can combine PDO's expertise in data with PACE's expertise in evidence synthesis, and how these two can come together to provide a more holistic services that can respond to decision makers' rapid and fairly acute decision-making needs in the Western Cape.
In describing the REAP partnership between the Western Cape Government, the Provincial Data Office, and PACE, there's a twofold concept that it's based on. The first is around evidence-informed decision-making, different methodologies, and related content, having its roots in an online social learning platform that's aimed at bringing all the partners, different levels of different pieces of content together. And the second level is really building a community of practice for evidence-informed decision-making, where we pull different methods, evidence products, policy areas, and stakeholders together in delivering evidence-based decision-making.
The Provincial Data Office has been on a data governance journey for quite some time. And I believe that we have matured and made significant strides in how we use data and just the use of data per se to inform decision-making. We talk about data-led and evidence-based decision-making. Now, building on the Provincial Data Office's strong data work, I think the one thing that we could do differently is to bring our data initiatives on a government-wide level into the existing evidence portfolio of REAP and be mutually inclusive of data and not just only focused on evidence.
We want to demonstrate different components of an ecosystem that the REAP is part of. So we have worked with the Department of Health and Wellness in the Western Cape Government around evidence mapping, in particular focus on mental health. We've also looked at the Department of Education, and we've kind of used evidence mapping again quite extensively to look at protocols, guidelines, bylaws, etc., and to kind of quantify that in that space.
Has the partnership help us inform policy or drive policy change? This certainly helped the department to identify that they've got over 800 pieces of policy documents, etc., that's floating around, it helped them also to narrow down where's the duplication and go further and say, listen, okay, what's the applicability of these things? Are they being used? And I think just to sort of like cut down the unnecessary policy work that may be in operation.
Stay tuned. As much as we have I think a decent online platform, I believe it will be app-based in 2025. That's, I think it will be an interesting change. And I think a big thank you to all the partners